Welcome to the Hockey Writers Prospect Corner, a show with our top prospects writing crew, bringing you the latest news, analysis, scouting reports, mocks, rankings, and much more. From the World Juniors to the NHL Draft floor, from the farm to the NHL, our team covers everything that happens in the world of prospects. So sit back, grab a notebook, and get ready for Prospect Corner.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Prospect Corner presented by the Hockey Writers. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the ongoing U18 World Junior Championship tournament that began last week. We mentioned it in last week's episode as well. Today, I guess I should mention, my name is Logan Horn. I am your host. And today, I'm joined by my co-hosts and fellow prospect analysts, Matthew Zator and Peter Baracchini. While I ask you guys how you're doing and introduce, I have a question for you to answer. And that is, which playoff series in the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs are you enjoying the most? And since, Peter, you're the only person here whose favorite team is in the playoffs, I need you to come up with a different series, not Toronto-Tampa, because that's...
I mean, it's a good thing
you're enjoying that, but...
I need like a pacemaker or heart monitor or something like that, because, man, that overtime game was wild. But I am really enjoying that New York, New Jersey series. Obviously, the Rangers jumped out 2-0. Devils came back with an overtime win of their own. Obviously, there was a lot going in because, it's battle of they're kind of like a close rival right now. They're battling it out. Really think that New Jersey is in tough because of the depth that the Rangers have, and obviously Devils being a younger team, but it's looking up to be a very interesting one. That's for sure. That was always circled on my list.
Yeah, that one's... It looked at first like it wasn't really going to live up to expectations. It's nice to see New Jersey get at least one back the other night here when we're recording. And Jack Hughes is doing all right. People were starting to get a little worried for him. They're like, oh, he can only score on a penalty shot. Hey, but no, he scored a big goal there. Obviously not. He had like 42 goals or something this year. But that one's been a ton of fun. Matt, how are you doing? What playoff series are you enjoying the most?
Doing good. I've enjoyed the Kraken Avalanche series. It's been really physical. Tons of, Colorado seems to be now taking over the series after that first game loss, but the Kraken are still in it, and that atmosphere at Climate Pledge Arena is just, it's insane. And it's great for, hopefully they can get their first win. And not have to have two losses, potentially the only ones, because if they do lose again, they could be done. Not get another home game this year. So, but yeah, the series itself has been pretty good. And even the game that Avalanche won, this past one, as we record here, the Kraken were in it quite a bit, and they scored the first goal in that game too. So,
yeah, that's another one that has been much more enjoyable. I don't know. That's been more enjoyable than I kind of expected it to be. Feel like a lot of people expected that to be a short one, with Colorado just dominating the whole time. And it was kind of the story of like, which team is going to win? The one that's super deep in Seattle, or the one with the crazy star power, Mikko Rantanen, Nathan MacKinnon, Cale Makar. And it's kind of been back and forth a little bit, but the stars have definitely come through for Colorado and the experience in the playoffs. So we'll see if the Kraken can sneak another game or two. Personally, it's almost too easy, but I'm gonna go with Toronto. Tampa has been my favorite, just because watching them put up touchdowns against each other and back and forth the first two games, and then go to the very end of overtime, basically in a last minute goal. Like it's been a fun series, and it's fun to watch all of the Leafs fans react very hard to everything that happens. First game loss, it was just full out panic. It's like, you lose another game, I'm done with this team. Fire literally everyone. But then they won that game by a lot, game 2, and then they won game 3, even though maybe they didn't deserve it. But a win's a win in the playoffs, and that's an important thing to be able to do when you're being outplayed.
It's been a ton of fun. The one thing that's eluded them is squeaking out ugly wins like that, and that usually builds a lot of character and momentum.
Sure.
Like we've seen that with Tampa in the past, Capitals, Penguins, where they've won games they really shouldn't have deserved, and yet, they've gone on to bigger, better things. So hopefully it's a start.
Well,
Yeah.
I think biggest thing before this isn't a playoff show, but
All good.
just
All
a
good.
quick
It's still
thought.
hockey.
Ryan O'Reilly, I
Yeah.
thought he was going to be a massive addition, and he has been. He scores the tying goal, and then he wins the face-off. Key face-off. That's what he does, and that's the reason Toronto brought him in. So,
Yeah, he's been brilliant for sure. All right. Well, we'll get into the show. As you mentioned, this is not a playoff show, but playoff hockey is happening. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So gotta watch it. All right. So we're going to start off right away. We're actually going to talk first about the very first game of this year's tournament, which was Canada-Sweden. And that game was ugly quick. It was a really shocking turn of events pretty early on in the first. And the game ended 8-0 for Sweden against Canada. Obviously, there's no Connor Bedard there for Canada, which could have been a slight difference maker, you would think. But I don't think he's that much of a difference maker to erase an 8-0 deficit. Sweden chased Carson Bjarnason, who we've talked about as generally considered one of the very best goaltending prospects in this draft. Chased him early. He allowed 5 goals on 7 shots. And Sweden just dominated the entire game. So, Peter, I'm going to come to you first. What do you take away from this game? What did you learn from this about Canada, about Sweden, any of the above?
Obviously, every single year for Canada, it's always going to be coming back to the question of goaltending. And obviously, that is a major concern, especially since Carson Bjarnason is the top-ranked goaltender heading into the draft. And obviously, Central Scouting feels that way, but I have been hesitant to give him that label as a top goaltender this season, mainly because of performances like that and results. Sometimes it's just not quite there. And obviously, like, Sweden was obviously deep down the middle or throughout the whole entire lineup. And when they released their roster, I knew this is going to be a very lethal and potent offense. Stenberg, Forsfjeld, Wahlberg throughout the lineup, like they are deep up front. They got the solid defense and mobility on the back end. And Erliden, who's, I don't believe he's ranked at all, and he's still putting up, stellar numbers and performances. So, I think it's just a case of, first game nerves, because last year Canada did not look good in their first game against the United States. So like that was another ugly loss. And obviously that repeated again this time around, but I don't think that you should technically write off Canada. It's obviously not a great thing to do because they can jump their way back in, get some momentum, get some confidence, which they're doing as of late. But I expected it to be a bit of a closer game, maybe a 3-2, 4-2, 5-3 kind of affair, but 8-0. They just, I don't know, like even defensively too, Canada didn't look very sound positionally. Bjarnason, again, a lot of holes in his game right now. Again, it was a mix of everything that could have gone wrong for Canada, and they just didn't have it right out of the gate. So that was very, very telling of their performance.
Yeah, for sure. It was definitely a shaky start, not the start I'm sure they wanted. But I will probably be talking about him a little later. But it was cool to see Gabriel Dag come in for Carson Bjarnason, 2025 draft eligible goaltender who's playing in the queue this year. He had decent numbers, but for like a 15 to 16 year season, to be at least a legit goalie in the queue is quite impressive, because that league is not kind on goaltenders. Matt, what are your thoughts on this game? Canada getting absolutely destroyed by Sweden. What do you think? What did you take from it?
Well, I was surprised to see it. Usually Sweden, Canada's very tight games, overtime games, stuff like that. They're usually a really good, power on power type thing. We've seen it in the gold medal game between these two teams. So it was very surprising to see an 8-0. Usually Canada's doing that to Germany, teams like that. But yeah, Sweden has done that to other teams as well. They've dominated, but usually not against Canada, US, those types of teams. But yeah, Canada, like Peter said, it was, they weren't that good defensively. Their goaltending wasn't good. Bjarnason didn't look like the top ranked goaltender. A lot of the goals, you'd want him to stop. There were a few just through traffic. Yeah. there was traffic, but there was some holes, and he wasn't compact. He wasn't, anything. I'm not a goaltender expert, but he didn't look solid. So, I mean, it's one thing, I mean, to do it against, I mean, Sweden is a really skilled team. So, but it's not like there were crazy goals that was like, oh yeah, there's, no goaltender will stop that. So, defensively wasn't good. Offensively, I mean, obviously they didn't score any goals, so I mean, they didn't get anything. But the last two games they've looked better. I mean, they won against Slovakia, they beat Germany, which that was expected. So hopefully that game is just a one-off, and they won't repeat it if they have to play Sweden, for probably in the medal rounds.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall it was surprising to see that against a team that they should at least be kind of neck and neck with.
Yeah, you would kind of expect, or I expected going into the game for it to be a little closer than that.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, Canada didn't have a superstar necessarily on their team, but Sweden certainly didn't either. And they just destroyed them up and down the ice the whole game. One thing, I think it's just another reminder of this strange situation around Canadian goaltenders in the last decade or so, where we're not really seeing a lot of elite goaltending coming out of Canada lately. You look at all of the best goalies in the NHL, and a large number of them nowadays there's more Americans, more Russians, more Swedes, and less Canadians as the years go by. And this is a conversation that comes up a lot at the U20 World Juniors, when we haven't had a real top prospect, at least draft year prospect, for quite a while. Mm-hmm. Sebastian Cossa, Devin Levi have been impressive in those tournaments, but they're still a ways away, and who knows if they'll really hit. I think this was a bit of a reminder, but it also could be a little hint of the future with Gabriel Dag, who looked pretty good in his little stint there against Sweden. He let in 3 more goals, but made a lot more saves than Bjarnason did. So who knows? All right. So as you mentioned there, Matt, actually, Canada followed up that hugely disappointing game with an 8-0 win this time against Germany, and then a 4-3 win, I believe. 4-3 win against Slovakia. So they turned it around a little bit already early on, and they've got a lot more scoring out of their guys, which means any amount of scoring. With several players, Calum, Ritchie, Porter Martone, 2024 draft eligible, Macklin Celebrini, 2024, and Nick Lardis, 2023 again, all being at least 3 points after 3 games. Also, Matthew Wood, I believe, has 3 points.
Yeah.
So they're picking it up. They're catching up a little bit. None of them have out of this world production, but they've looked really good. So Matt, do you think that these 2 games are enough to kind of get Canada back on track? They went through their adversity, and they'll make it onto the medal round, maybe make it that far, or do you think it might have shaken them a little too much? Do you think that might define their tournament a bit?
I mean, like you said, I think it was Peter that said, last year they lost against the US pretty handily in the first game, and looked to, bring it together the rest of the tournament. So I think they could, be fine. They looked, I mean, Germany, like I said, they were expected to win that game. Not many shots on goal. Bjarnason only had an 11 save shutout. So, I mean, it's not like he was tested too much. You can't say, okay, he's fine now. I mean, so, they're expected to win that one against Slovakia. I mean, Slovakia's been a really good team in this tournament so far. And, lots of great performances from that side. And I believe Slovakia came back in that game to make it a game, and Canada ended up winning it. But, a lot of their guys like Macklin Celebrini, that great goal from the goal line, they just snuck it in there.
Yeah.
Lots of great, I mean, Matthew Wood gets a couple goals against Germany. I was a little bit worried that I'm like, oh, but I'm putting up too much on him and he's not doing anything. Gets a couple goals. So I think he has 4 points. So, I mean, we'll see how it goes the rest of the way when they start playing against, teams like, we'll talk about the US, who's been just insane. so far. Play maybe Sweden again. We'll see when they start playing against some bigger teams. Slovakia's been pretty good, so that was a close game. I think ultimately they'll be able to fix it and play against some, play better, and they have already. So, and they've added Riley Heidt, who had that great shot block right at the end of the game against Slovakia. And so that's a big addition to their team. So we'll see. I think Canada will be fine. I don't know about medaling. I mean, it looks like Sweden has that in the bag. I mean, it's early, but they look really good. And then the US has been insane. So, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, that is a good thing to mention. Riley Heidt getting airdropped after the Prince George Cougars got swept in the second round of the WHL playoffs. So that should be a pretty solid addition there. We've talked about him plenty on this show and how much we're all big fans of Riley Heidt at this point. Peter, what are your thoughts? Do you think these two wins here and getting some good goals in, that big block from Heidt, getting another player added who's on the older side, at least compared to half the team seems to be 2024 or later guys. Do you think that's enough? Do you think this team is turning it around, or are they maybe a little too shaken like last year's? Because last year they did lose that game to USA, and then they seemed to figure it out for a little bit, and then I believe they lost in the quarterfinals in overtime. They were out pretty quick.
Czechia.
So Czechia. So I remember a couple bad penalties they took in that game. So do you think it'll kind of be a similar situation to that? Will they get tripped up again, or do you think they're a little too good and they'll figure it out past there?
I do think they're more balanced offensively this time around, even on the back end. Obviously, you still have some miscues here and there, obviously some of the decision making from defensemen like Caden Price and everything like that has crept in a little bit, but at the same time, it seems like if they're able to cut out those bad habits, then good things are going to happen for this team. Obviously, both of you mentioned the addition of Heidt. That's a big addition considering his energetic ability to play on both sides of the puck. This guy's an absolute gamer when it comes whenever he's on every single shift, and he's giving it his all. And I do think that they do need to step it up against tougher competition. I do think that, maybe that 8-0 win or a loss is probably going to not sit well with them. And maybe they're going to put their best foot forward and, show a little bit more of a complete effort and more, Canadian style hockey that we're known to seeing from time to time. Again, they got, players that have competed internationally before. We talked about Wood, Ritchie, Price as well, Dragicevic. This team does have the pieces to perform well and go deep for a run. Again, I'm going to come back to goaltending because Bjarnason himself, he's looking to starting to turn a page. But cautious optimism on my end overall for Canada, but I just want to see what happens with tougher competition. And again, Slovakia is moving up in the world right now, and they're going to be a tougher out. So for them to have that kind of a, game, but, they allowed Slovakia back in, I believe it was 3-1 at one point, and they crawled back in, got to tighten up defensively a little bit there. But overall, I think that, they have been taking steps every single game. They have looked better, and now they just need to keep the foot on the gas and be consistent overall.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's really fair to question the defense and goaltending because the goaltending has looked shaky. Defensemen are very talented offensive players, but have lacked a little bit on the other end, is I think fair to say, especially against Sweden, but also against Slovakia. On to some other teams now. I want to talk about Sweden because they have been so much fun to watch. Yeah. They've been so much fun. They've been an absolute wagon through their first 3 games. They have 3 wins. They've outscored Canada, Slovakia, and who was it they played today? I forgot. I didn't write that one down. Let me see. I can find it right here. Oh, and Czechia. Yeah, Slovakia, Czechia, Canada by a combined score of 15-3. And that's with an unranked 18-year-old goaltender, Noah Erliden. Yeah. Never heard of him. Never seen him in Central Scouting rankings or any other rankings. But he is sitting atop the actually technically not, but he's right up near the top of the statistical categories for all goaltenders after 3 games here. 1 goal against average, because there was just 1 game there where he's allowed goals at all. And a .958 save percentage after 3 games, which is pretty sweet. You might remember, what was it? Magnus have a lead, the Twins, last year for Sweden at the U18s. He was ranked, but his wicked tournament for Sweden really picked up his draft stock. Anyway, Sweden has been just a ton of fun, led on offense by Axel Sandin-Pellikka and Otto Stenberg, who's the captain. But they also have had just great contributions, like Peter mentioned, Zeb Forsfjall, Theo Lindstein, Anton Wahlberg. There's just been a ton of players contributing for this team. It's been very exciting, very fun to watch. So Sweden. Peter, I'm going to come to you first here. Who's impressed you the most for Sweden so far?
I do want to say Anton Wahlberg, but I am not going to say Anton Wahlberg.
No
I'm going to go with Lindstein. This is a defenseman who was supposed to be possibly top 15 ranked coming into the season, has, very sound two-way game, very good defensively, but offensively is, has that mindset with his playmaking abilities, great crisp passer, strong in transition, fluid skater. He had all the makings, but production throughout the season just wasn't quite where it needed to be. And 7 points in 14 games at the J20 level, spent most of his time in the SHL with 2 points in 32 games. And obviously don't want to take too much into that because, he's just coming up. He's just getting his feet wet. I mean, he did have 1 assist in 12 games last season, but this is more of like an important role for him around trying to be in the lineup a little bit more. So I think maybe that took a little bit, or his draft stock may have taken a little bit much of a hit, but if his play overall right now is any indication, I think we should see a team take him early on in the second, because I think in a short amount of time, he's kind of improved his draft stock. But overall, he's very composed. He's very smart, identifying the lanes. And it's just very great to see him try and get back into that spot, because there wasn't a whole lot of traction at the start of the season for a lot of scouts to say, you know what, I don't feel confident in having him as a first rounder. What's his offensive production going to be like? Is it going to translate? But if his smarts and his defensive game is already there, I think the points will come. And maybe, it's starting to come right now for him playing at this tournament. Again, small sample compared to what he's done throughout the season. But if this is the kind of production he's going to produce at the next level, he can be a very steady two-way 40-point kind of defenseman that can make an impact in all aspects of the game. So I've been very impressed with Lindstein.
Yeah, that's a great pick. I mean, there's no real wrong pick here, but I'm a big fan of Lindstein as well. And he feels like someone that slid maybe a little more than he deserved. And now all us North Americans are eating crow, trying to be like, oh, I always liked him. No, he was good. He was good the whole time. And just kind of admitting that we were probably wrong and that he's really good, because he is. Matt, what are your thoughts on this? Who's impressed you the most for Sweden after their first few games here?
Well, I think Axel Sandin-Pellikka took it personally when Central Scouting dropped him from being the top defenseman, because he's been just insane in this tournament. The first game against Canada, he dominated. He's continued it. He's the leading scorer and defenseman in this tournament so far. He's really solidified for me that he's going to be, obviously he's going to be a first round pick, but I think he's definitely going to be in the top 15 now. Reinbacher will probably, it's hard to say because I don't know. He is playing in this tournament, right? Reinbacher
He's not. Austria's not here, but
Austria's not here, right?
He's going to play for them at the Men's World Championship.
Right. That's right. So he couldn't help himself anyway. I mean, he may, with World Championships will help. But Sandin-Pellikka has been. I don't know why I thought he was Latvian, but I was going to say Latvian,
okay.
Austria. But Axel Sandin-Pellikka. I mean, he's impressed me not just in this tournament, but before the World Juniors. Now he's in, against his peers here at more of his age level, and he's dominating too. So he's just been great. And I think, unfortunately, he's not going to be where the Canucks draft. Probably not. But he's just been, I think he is probably, like I said, he's probably one of the top defensemen in this draft, and he's just showing it with his mobility, his leadership on the back end. And yeah, I'm excited to see him in the NHL because I think he's going to be a heck of a defenseman. As much as there's so many Swedish defensemen that have been really good, he's just going to be added to that.
Yeah, he's been unreal, and he's, at very least, he's reduced the gap between him and David Reinbacher.
Yeah.
I do think, we don't want to overreact and swap them necessarily. Maybe you think that's the right thing, though, and that's fine. But I think Reinbacher will have a good shot at showing what he can do against grown men at the Men's World Championship. I think that'll be a really good spot for him. I remember seeing Owen Power. Was that in his draft year? I believe it was when he went to the World Championships right after
I believe that was
college season ended.
Yeah. The one where they started 0-3 and they came back and won the gold medal. So
I mean, I'm not saying Reinbacher's having that type of run for Austria, or maybe not even the same impact as Owen Power, probably not. But I feel like he'll be a legit contributor, one of the better players on that Austrian team. I'm not familiar with a lot of their senior level players, but I believe in Reinbacher. But man, Sandin-Pellikka has been unreal. Like watching him at the U20 World Juniors, I think he had 1 point in 7 games. I know you could see it, but it wasn't really translating too much on offense or defense. But you could see he earned the trust as such a young player, and that was impressive. Got the ice time, looked good. Already in 3 games, he has 6 points, so he's just been unfair. My quick player I've been impressed with is Tom Willander. Willander is pronounced Willander. I only know that. Shout out to I can't remember his name. There's this awesome, oh man, I feel so bad. I'm gonna have to get this put into the description. There's this awesome Swedish Red Wings fan on Twitter who does tons of great Swedish coverage of all the players playing out there. Big Homer had a great time making fun of Team Canada losing to Sweden. And he put me onto the pronunciation game of these Swedes. So Willander, that goes out to you, person whose name I forgot and I feel really bad about. Anyway, I've got a quick fire question here, and then we'll go on to the second half. We'll talk about Team USA, some of the goaltending situations, stuff like that. So my question here that I need you guys to answer, I guess we kind of just talked about this, but I want to get your thoughts on how close it's gotten, Matt. So as we talked about, Sandin-Pellikka has been just unbelievable. Do you think he's got a real chance of being the first defenseman off the board? Do you think he could have swapped the order here past David Reinbacher? I'm sure there are some teams that probably think so.
Yeah, I mean, again, it'll depend on what team is where they are, because he is a different type of defenseman than Reinbacher. I mean, he's a lot more dynamic, I think, offensively he's going to be. So I'm going to say that if a team like the Detroit Red Wings are in that spot, I think they could potentially draft him over Reinbacher because Swedish. It just happened. And he's just a heck of a defenseman that would really add to their group that they have already. So I think it just depends on what team is around there that thinks is the better defenseman. So I didn't really answer that question, but
all good. I mean, totally fair. We already talked about it. I just wanted to say I found the name again. It's Lars Thorsell on Twitter. He's excellent. He's got some real good coverage of Swedish players and of the Red Wings. Shout out to Lars. Peter, what are your thoughts? Do you think there's a chance Sandin-Pellikka could be the first defenseman off the board if he continues this kind of play?
Yeah, and it's really tough because they're both excellent in their own regard. Sandin-Pellikka has the offensive capabilities. Reinbacher has, two-way smarts and transitional game as well, but Sandin-Pellikka is very good in transition. So again, kind of like Matt, moot point right then and there. But I think Reinbacher has that edge because he is playing with senior competition. He is playing at the top level. I believe in the Swiss League. It's the Swiss League, correct? Yeah.
Yes.
So
NLA. Yeah.
Drew a blank there. But kind of seems like the safe bet. But if you want that offensive upside and that high-end skill from the back end, like you see from other top teams that have, puck moving defensemen, Sandin-Pellikka is your guy, but it all depends on, again, based on a team's need. Do you need a more steady presence, or although Sandin-Pellikka has shown to provide some good defense, so it really is tough. And again, kind of like Matt, I don't know if I answered the question, but I will say that maybe he has kind of jumped up a little bit more, and maybe he is just has the slight edge, but we'll all see. I don't think there's a wrong answer to this at all.
Yeah, that's fair. I think Reinbacher, I feel pretty confident that Reinbacher will be the first one off the board just because of the size and the fact that he's pretty close to NHL ready. Being super successful in a top 4 role in a good European league is important. He could probably have a David Jiricek level impact in the AHL next year. Maybe not quite as much, but I feel like the fact that he's so close to the NHL, at least in terms of competition, his defense is there and he's bigger. But I do think Axel Sandin-Pellikka has probably gotten a few more people more excited than they were, and us included. All right. So before we go on to the second half of our show here, I just wanted to mention that today's episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Hockeypedia. Have you ever been looking for details on a player that just competed at the World Junior Championship, U20 or U18? Do you want to know who owns the New York Islanders? Do you want to know what each NHL award is for and who they're named after? If you're interested in these or any other hockey-related questions, make sure you check out and bookmark the Hockey Writers Hockeypedia. It's an ever-growing collection of hockey resources that is invaluable to any fan looking for information. Check for the link in the show description and dive in today. All right, so as I mentioned, we're going to talk about Team USA here for a little bit. We talked last week about how they're kind of the perennial favorite in these tournaments because they've been playing together as a team all year, and it's basically most of the very best American-born players in this draft year age range, and a few from the younger age range that we'll also, I'm sure, get a chance to talk about here. Someone who's really stood out in the first few games is Gabe Perreault, who has somehow gone under the radar a little. Like if you look at the top forwards for the NTDP this year, the U18 squad, you got Will Smith, Oliver Moore, you got Ryan Leonard. People usually talk about those guys first, and then Gabe Perreault is kind of off to the side a little. He's done nothing but produce points over the last few seasons, but some still think the lack of his size, maybe a little bit of a tendency to play towards the perimeter, and his edge work and lack of kind of general mobility hinder him a little bit, will make him something like a late first rounder. But he's shown that his passing, his straight line speed, his playmaking in every sense of that word has been quite impressive at this tournament. He's sitting at 11 points in 3 games, 3.67 points per game at this point, which is just nuts. So, Peter, where do you think Gabe Perreault ends up going on draft day, and what more can he do to improve his draft stock? If his performance so far isn't enough, then what will it take? Does he need 5 points per game?
This is really tough because obviously when you look at his overall stats, even like with the development team this season, what he's done is just absolutely phenomenal. But then again, points really don't mean a whole lot, especially when you look at the whole bigger picture here. And like you said, there is questions about, not his speed necessarily, but his footwork and his edges and his ability to, kind of use that lower portion of his body where maybe he does get pushed off a little bit too easily, and maybe that size factor does coming in. But then again, that counters that because you have seen him be effective in on the forecheck and not letting that get the best of him. So I really don't want to give him like a top 15 spot because there are some things that he needs to work on, and even some of his decision making too, maybe like doesn't quite put the puck in the right spot. Sometimes he holds on to it. Sometimes it's just a little bit maybe he overthinks things a little bit, and it's a little bit ends up in a risky play. But I think maybe if you do have him in that 15 to 20 range, the latest 25, that may be the perfect range for him in this draft, because you still have a lot of factors. And even if he could put up like, 5 points per game or whatever, but there's still like little mistakes here and there where they are glaring. You do need to work on them, but maybe it's kind of well worth the risk, especially if he's willing to put in the work to just better round out his game. So definitely impressive results. I mean, 121 points with the development team. I mean, what? Like those are like be a pro numbers in NHL. But I do think that, there are some things to his game where he does need to improve, but points aren't everything. But if he's able to work on them, then maybe he can move up and maybe a team will take a swing on him early on.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I don't think it's a perfect comparison, but Corey Pronman of The Athletic made the comparison between Perreault and Andrei Kuzmenko, Vancouver Canucks, who's, I mean, he's significantly older, more experienced in professional hockey, but the skating isn't really there. It's not elite. He's not going to burn past anyone. He's not going to sneak through all the defenses, but he's pretty smart, and he puts himself in a good position to succeed and score points. And I mean, if you could guarantee that he's going to turn into a guy that can score 30 plus goals in his first year, well, obviously not his first year, but 30 plus goals in his prime, 60, 70 points, I'm sure people would be very happy to take Perreault in the top 20. You can't guarantee that. And it's not a perfect comparison, but I've liked that one, thinking about that, where basically everything is above average. His skating is not, though. His skating will hold him back unless he can make some big changes. Matt, what are your thoughts on Gabe Perreault? Is there anything he can do to improve his draft stock? Where do you think he might go on draft day?
Yeah, well, like Peter said, points aren't everything, but they are something. When you look at them, I mean,
they jump off the page.
They do jump off the page, but there have been a lot of players where you look at that in their draft years and they're like, why isn't this guy drafted in the first round? Because points aren't everything. There's a lot of guys that dominate their leagues. You got to see who are they playing against, who are they, playing with, like you mentioned, he's playing with a couple ridiculously good players, and, Ryan Leonard and Will Smith, and they're both going to be probably in the top 10 to 15, definitely top 10, 15. So, I mean, it's tough. And I've loved Perreault. I think he's going to end up being a heck of an NHL player. Like I think I mentioned him being, it's hard to find playmaking wingers. And he is one of those guys that are going to help out these centermen that don't have a lot of, they need a playmaker on their line to score. And I think he can be that for sure, for like a Ryan Kessler type player where they don't really, they need someone that can actually set them up because they can't really create on their own. So I think he's going to end up being that. But I mean, there are some issues in his game. Like you say, the lack of size is something I think can, we've seen it. There's so many players be able to overcome that. But yeah, the edge work and that type of stuff, I mean, it can be worked on, definitely can be refined. But I think Perreault's he's definitely a first rounder. I think he's going to end up being in that 20, 25 range. He could sneak into the top 20 because of what he's doing in this tournament and what he's done all year. But yeah, if we win a gold medal and he's a big part of the effort in that game, I mean, I'm sure GMs and scouts are going to be like, yeah, we got to get this guy. So yeah, I love him as a player. I think he's going to end up being a heck of an NHLer. But he definitely has some stuff to work on, and we'll see. If he can do it, then I like that Andrei Kuzmenko comparison because, I mean, Kuzmenko and Perreault, I think Perreault has much more speed, but I think, the comparison is pretty good for the two guys because, we'll see. That's a mantra on this show. We'll see.
We'll see. It's a tough question. I feel like Perreault, I think you're probably right, guys, probably in the 20 range, 25, somewhere in there. He's one of the players that it just upsets me to think about a playoff team getting him. That just boils my blood. I just don't like that. He's really good. Personally, my latest rankings, he cracked my top 16, and I think he's going to stay put. I don't think this tournament is going to lead to him falling anywhere. I get the concerns around some of the strength and size and the some of the technique with his skating. I just think he problem solves really well, even without great mobility. And I do like his playmaking. I'm not so sure that's going to be an issue. Also, if you look at his older brother, Gabe Perreault, and his dad, who played in the NHL, Yannick Perreault, they're a lot thicker than he is. But also remember, he is a very young teenager.
Yeah.
And I know at 18, I was not physically mature.
Yeah.
So I feel pretty confident that he's going to be able to put on the muscle, put on the strength needed. And with that does come at very least a little more speed in skating. Not necessarily, that's not going to fix your technique, but if you get stronger, you're going to get a little faster at least, which doesn't hurt either. I like him a lot. I'm happy to see him getting a bit more attention here. I'm very excited to see where he goes on draft day. It could be a wild one. Pretty big range, those first 4 forwards for the NTDP. Someone else I wanted to bring up, there's a few people we could talk about from the NTDP. I'm going to bring up Cole Hutson, who's not eligible until 2024. Younger brother of Lane Hutson, who you might have heard of the 300 times we've talked about him on this show, because Lane Hutson is very fun to watch and follow in hockey. Cole, though, younger brother, has looked excellent for the USA so far as an underager. I saw his points after the first 2. Where is he at now? 5 points in 3 games. The only defenseman with more points than him is actually Axel Sandin-Pellikka. He's tied with Theo Lindstein. So Sandin-Pellikka is the only one with more points than Cole Hutson, who's a year younger. So NHL teams will likely have the same concerns with Cole as they did with Lane, which is literally just size. That's the only complaint you could have about either of them in their draft year, basically. But they're very similarly gifted with offense and excellent skating. And Cole is actually outscoring Lane when you look at their draft -1 seasons. And Cole has a later birthday in his draft year than Lane did. So he's younger and he's scoring more than Lane did. And you look at what Lane Hutson did in the NCAA this year, and you get a little excited about Cole, or I do. So what are your thoughts on the play of Cole Hutson? Do you think any teams will learn from their mistakes in time for him to be taken in the first round in 24? Or is he going to fall to the end of the second again, just like Lane did? Matt, what are your thoughts on Cole Hutson and how we're just feels like we're repeating, getting a mirror image of Lane Hutson again, basically?
He's been impressive, and this is again we've had there's a few underagers in this tournament that's impressed and for the 2024 and 2025, like we mentioned with Dag. I think he'll end up being undersized. Just seems like teams don't get it. I mean, just pick him. I mean, it's there's so many examples that they're fine. They'll be fine in the NHL. I think it'll end up being that Cole, and I don't think he'll go down to the end of the second round just because of what Lane's done. You're like, well, he'll probably do something similar. So I want to say he's going to be drafted in the later first, but in reality, I think he'll probably be in the second round just because of his size, because teams don't seem to get that this doesn't matter as much anymore. But he's been impressive, and we'll see what he does. I mean, he'll probably be on the World Junior U18, U20 team as well if he keeps this up, and we'll see what he does there, because he's got a pretty big shoes to fill for his brother, what he's done. I don't know if he's committed to any university yet, but
Boston University, 25-26.
So is that the same one as Lane, right? Or is Lane is different?
I always confuse the two. I feel so bad for Americans, but I always mix up the two. Yeah, Lane is at Boston U.
So I would assume they go to the same school. Usually that happens. So we'll see. He'll have some big shoes to fill when he goes there too, because Lane had a heck of a freshman season there.
Absolutely.
So I'm excited to see what he can do, because until recently I didn't even know he had a brother. And it's great to see that he's almost the same level. So that's great.
Yeah. I also want to mention Cole Hutson is still 16 years old. He doesn't turn 17 until the end of June. And he already scored 18 points in, 14 games with the U18 team at the end of the season. So He's got a pretty good head start into his draft here. Peter, what are your thoughts on Cole Hutson? Do you think any teams will learn from their mistakes with Lane last year? Or is it going to be pretty similar story? Similar size, similar everything, really. Like, very impressive player, but size might be too much.
I'm going to say no, it's not. It's going to be different. And obviously his Elite Prospects page shows 5'8" for Cole Hutson, but in a post from Stephen Ellis from the Daily Faceoff, apparently Cole's 5'10". So he's got 2 inches already on Lane Hutson.
Hey.
Again,
not bad.
So I think the height differential is going to play a big factor in this time around. But then again, kind of like Matt too, I don't understand why Lane fell so low. Even if he was out of the first round, he shouldn't have dropped past the 40 spot because of his, ability to just be a dynamic player. And he's the same description, same type of play style. Dynamic with the puck, very quick, very smart, reads the lanes very well, can be a big factor in transition. But I think where May stands out and is in that same post, Hudson or Cole describes that he is more physical than Lane and can close gaps quicker where he's describing his game. So I think that assessment alone may tend to bode well with scouts right now. That's not to say that Lane doesn't do the same thing, but he is, probably going to be a little bit more of a factor defensively than Lane. But I do think that, kind of like what you said about Gabe too, there's that players this age, they're not fully physically mature. And we know Lane's still going to grow out of that 5'8" frame into something around 5'10", 5'11", add more muscle. Cole's probably going to do the same thing. So why not take that high end skill set and that, defensive abilities and the way that he's able to close those gaps quickly and use that size to his advantage a little bit more. He should be a shoo-in as maybe top 15 at this point early on. So again, too early to tell, but that's where I would probably have him early right now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's funny that NHL teams are willing to take players that are very tall that would be considered like a project player where you need to, teach them how to do everything else other than being tall, basically. They're happy to take those guys in the first, early second. But then when it comes to a short player who's incredibly well developed skill-wise and just is 2 inches shorter than you'd ideally like, they're happy to leave those guys on the board. It's just interesting because you look at Lane Hutson, and if he was an inch taller in his draft year, maybe he's like an early second. He's 2 inches taller. He's a first rounder, probably. He's another inch taller than that. Top 20. Like, who knows? It's
6'2" first
the
overall.
height.
Yeah.
I mean, if he was 6'2", he could be in the conversation with Simon Nemitz and David Jiricek. Like, he might have legitimately been in that conversation if he was the same height as them, because he's so incredibly skilled with the puck. And I would say he's right on par with them when it comes to draft +1 seasons. They all were really impressive, but it'll be fun to see if he is 5'10", if that's accurate. And he's grown that much since the start of the year, then I think Cole Hutson's got a real good shot at going in the first, but should be fun to watch. I'm sure he'll be another guy that we just fawn over for a year before watching him go in the second round. All right. Now we're going to take a second to look at the goalies in this tournament. This isn't necessarily the tournament to watch for goaltenders because at least it hasn't been for a couple of years, because we've not had like really high end goaltending prospects in the draft for a couple of years now. But it's already been very interesting. Carson Bjarnason has a save percentage that's just above 800, though to be fair, that's recovered quite a lot since the first game when his save percentage was what would that be? Like 100 and something out of 1,000. So he's already recovered quite a bit and looked decent since then. Michael Hrabal has been lights out. Let me just check the numbers here. Yeah, lights out for Czechia, 960 save percentage, despite having a record of 1-2, 1 win, 2 losses. But he's been incredible for Czechia. He's not the problem for them. Scoring has been the problem. And then Trey Augustine, someone else who we've talked about quite a bit. has been good overall. The game against Finland kind of tanked his save percentage a bit, but he's over 900 save percentage, which for most junior leagues and tournaments is actually quite impressive. Still is pretty solid. So this might actually have legitimate NHL draft implications, because as we've talked about recently, Carson Bjarnason, top ranked goalie by NHL Central Scouting, which gives you just an idea of what NHL teams are looking at. So there's a chance that this tournament does nothing to shake the people that believe Bjarnason is the best goalie. There's a chance that this tournament does nothing to shake that opinion. But there's a chance that it shuffles it quite a bit, Michael Hrabal. So Peter, I'm going to come to you here first. Which goalie do you think goes first? Not who would you take first or anything. Who do you think goes first if this tournament maybe has a say in that? And who do you think is the best chance of being named the best goalie in the tournament?
I still think it's going to be Trey Augustine. I do think that the fact that he's at a young age, the fact that he's getting all these, accomplishments on the world stage, the record that he had going back and forth with the development team in the USHL is just absolutely impressive too. And his composure, his movement and mobility in the crease, his ability to track the puck, I think it gives him some sort of nod to be the first goalie taken, whether that's in the first or not, considering how deep it is. It's up in the air, but I do think he is going to be top goaltender in this draft class. But then again, anything can happen. Goalies are basically a mystery, especially right now. Like you said, like goaltending is up in the air at this point. Like it's like it is what it is. I actually don't know where I'm going with this, but right. I'm just going to end it right there. I'm just going to end it right there. I do end think it on a high. Yeah. Augustine, I think, is going to be that top name this year. But if we're looking at the flip side of things, where it's going to be top goaltender, I don't know. I kind of liked Noah Erliden. I thought he's been really strong. Everyone's going to point to the fact that he's 5'11", and if you're not 6 feet, 6'1", 6'2", 6'3" as a goaltender, you're not going to get that recognition. But at the same time, he's keeping the puck out. And we even talked about Hugo Havelid in that U18 tournament last year. 4-1, 929 in 5 games played, 241 goals against average, and unfortunately didn't get taken. But why not give him that chance? Obviously, he's a little bit shorter than Erliden, but we see how UC Saros is playing, and he's been dynamite for the Nashville Predators. I think he's going to be in the running for the top goaltender too. Obviously, when you look at the stats, it's Hrabal first. Erliden not that far behind, but even Evan, I want to say it's Evan, is pronounced, or it's spelled EWAN, but I'm Evan Huey, Cristobal Huey's son. He's looking pretty good for the Swiss. 994 or 0.945 save percentage, 1.33 goals against average for the Swiss in 3 games, and yeah, he's throwing his name in there. He's having a really strong performance as well. So I think I'd give my nod to Erliden, but I guess it's too early to tell at this point.
That's fair. I do think Huey is a great call there, because the tournament being in Switzerland, that wouldn't hurt the fans to be really into it. But honestly, he's got 2 wins and a really, really solid play so far through 3 games for Switzerland. And if they make it even just to the medal games, like if they make it out of the quarterfinals,
elimination,
he could have a real shot at that, and the fans would be all over it, which is honestly worth it at that point. If it's a coin flip, give it to the fans. Matt, what are your thoughts? Do you think this tournament's doing anything gonna have real implications for the 2023 draft when it comes to goalies? Which goalie do you think goes first in the draft, and who do you think who might be named the best goalie in the tournament?
Yeah, Bjarnason, I think his stock has dropped a bit from this tournament. It's unfortunate because, we've talked about it. We've kind of gone back and forth of who the top is, and it hasn't been Bjarnason. I don't think any of us has said that. So, you're looking at, he hasn't really helped himself. So I think it's between Hrabal and Augustine. I want to go Hrabal because he's had a really good tournament for a team that doesn't score goals, and that puts a lot more pressure on your goaltender when the team in front of you is not giving you much support. So every save you make, you're like, well, I better make every save or probably not going to win. So I think there's a lot more pressure on him to perform, and he's done it. While Augustine has got like a high-powered offense in front of him that's like, well, he lets in 2 goals. Who cares? They'll probably score 8. So, I mean, I think that bears a bit. So I want to say Hrabel's going to be chosen first just based on this tournament. But Augustine, I mean, I think it's a toss-up between the two. I think it's going to be really close between them as well in the draft. I think it's going to be like Augustine gets picked, and then a few picks later, it's Hrabel. So I don't know when that'll be, but we'll find out. As for like a top goaltender this tournament, I really like that Huey call out as well, because, it's great for a goaltender, especially in his home country, hosting the tournament, and he's putting on a show. Again, a team that doesn't score a lot of goals, so he has to make a lot of saves for the team to win. I mean, Switzerland's a lot better defensively a lot of the time. Their systems are usually really solid. So I think he always has a good chance. Any goalie on Switzerland has a good chance because of that. But you're still probably stopping 30 plus shots a night, because I mean that's just how it is when you're a weaker team. And I look at that. So I think UA is a good chance. It's and Erlen. I always bad pronunciation for Erladen. For Sweden has also been a very big surprise to me, and he's put himself in the running as well, because unfortunately there's no more rankings that'll come out for NHL Central Scouting, but I think after this tournament, if they would have done it afterwards, I think he may be ranked now. So I think a team may take a flyer in the 6th, 7th round on him because of it, but we said that about Havelid as well, and he didn't. So
yeah, it's always tough. I as you mentioned there, it always is pretty fun on draft day, usually day 2 of the draft, when whenever it happens that the first goaltender gets taken in the next like 30-40 picks, like all the top goalies go, everyone just starts panicking and taking a goalie at their next pick. I think this tournament is going to be relatively important for the draft for goaltenders. Bjarnason, a whole lot of the appeal for him, and I still think he's probably the top goalie in my eyes. It's getting closer though. Some of the argument around it was, he was on a really bad team in Brandon, which is very true. If you watch the Brandon Wheat Kings this year, you may be entitled to compensation because it was kind of rough. And to be fair, this Team Canada defense is not great either. But he's on Team Canada, you'd expect the team to play a little better, him to play a little better. It's been rough. I wouldn't be shocked for Michael Hrabel to pass him, because they're kind of the guys that I think are probably the most like prototypical NHL guys with how NHL goalies look nowadays when it comes to size. Hrabel is 6'6". He's massive. And having such a good performance like this, I think that will win a couple people over. And so I'm going to say Hrabel's the first off the board. And also that Hrabel has the best shot at being named goalie of the tournament, just because he's been lights out. And if they can go on a little bit of a run, if they can score a few more goals, because like we said, he's allowed 4 goals and lost 2 games.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty tough. You got to apologize to him after that. Like I'm sure they all did after those games. But I just think I just don't think that's stopping anytime soon. He's massive. And if he's starting to put together more and more of the technical side of the goaltending position, then that's very exciting, very very promising for NHL teams who would want to probably sign him, have him in juniors for a little bit, have him in the AHL for a while, and then they're not coming in right away. But if he's got the size already and he's starting to put together the technique, then I think he's probably first off the board and maybe goalie of the tournament. Okay, so here I'm going to open up the floor because there's a few guys that we obviously want to talk about but haven't had the chance yet with these questions. So Matt, I'll come to you first. Who is someone in this tournament that you want to talk about that you haven't had the chance to yet? Who's someone that's exciting you with their play here?
Cole Eiserman. I mean, this is a 2024 draft, I mean, he's not even going to be drafted this year, and we'll be talking a lot about him next year. But he's been lights out, 6 goals, I believe, already. I mean, yes, he's playing with some pretty good players, but he's also finishing at a high rate. I mean, his shot is just off the charts. He's one of the better. He's probably, I mean, I haven't looked at the whole 2024 draft, but he's probably one of the better scorers in that class. And he's, yeah, so there you go. He's got NHL shot. It looks like an NHL shot already. That one timer that he had on the power play, I believe, in one of the games, that's just off the charts. So I mean, Cole Eiserman. At first time I heard his name, I'm like, before I even checked, I'm like, is that like related to Eiserman? Eiserman? No, it felt differently. American. Yeah, it's a little different. It's quite a bit different actually. But he's really come out and play. He's just been good. He's just been not just good. He's been amazing so far. And this is not a team that's not even. It's not even. Usually, this is dominated by draft players, and he's been great. So I want to shout out Cole Eiserman because, yeah, 6 goals. Pretty good.
Not bad. 3 games, 6 goals. I just want to say a couple things on Cole Eiserman, and Peter, you're welcome to as well, because this is the obvious, like, we got to talk about this guy. But Eiserman is just over 2 weeks. If he was just about like 2 weeks younger, he'd be eligible for the 2025 draft. He's just barely eligible for 2024. And genuinely watching him play this year for the U17 team, he spent the last little bit with the U18 NTDP squad. Aside, if you take Connor Bedard out of the equation, I really feel like Eiserman might be the best shooter I've watched among prospects since Matthews and Laine. Like, I feel like as a and that's not even his draft here yet. But as a prospect, I genuinely think he's an excellent shooter. He's got a wicked wrister, great one-timer, as you mentioned, Matt. This is not on the level of Bedard, but similarities are definitely there. The way he can change his angle at the last second, do that kind of curl drag wrister that's becoming more popular. Yeah, he's going to be very exciting. So I'm excited about Cole Eiserman as well, if you couldn't tell.
I'll make that 3 for 3. I mean, his accuracy and deceptiveness is very impressive for in Eiserman's game. I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal. And it does sound like you're saying Steve Eiserman. But but yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be a battle between those two as, like, you know, the next wave of like star-studded goal scoring prospects, because both of them are going to be extremely lethal. You know, I can't say anything else other than what Matt and Logan said, but I just want to highlight Kasper Halttunen really quickly. This is a player that I was really, really high on coming into the draft season. This is kind of like a prototypical power forward. This is a player with a massive frame. I believe he's around 6'3", 192 pounds, physical in the corners, can lay an open nice hit, but man, does he have a really powerful and accurate release as well. But the season, it kind of seemed like things were going off in a bad way for him. I mean, he wasn't averaging a lot of minutes. He was dealing with injuries, including a bad head injury as well. So his draft stock kind of took a tumble, kind of plummeted down, kind of dropped for me as well, because the consistency wasn't there. But maybe he's starting to turn a page right now where that shot's on display, where he has 3 goals for Finland at this tournament right now. And I believe, if I counted correctly, obviously there are a lot of ties here, but I believe he's still in the top 15 in scoring right now with 4 points in 3 games. So hopefully that this is a good sign for him. And I was going to highlight him as my prospect of the week, or like a split between the two, but since we're already here, I might as well just talk about him. So really impressed with what he's been able to do so far. And hopefully he can continue that, because I really love every aspect of his game, where he's that physical menace, but both offensively and physically.
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to mention another person real quick, and that's Ryan Leonard. You know, you've got the high flying top line for the USA there with Perreault, Smith. Those guys are doing their own thing, but Leonard has been very impressive as well. There have been times earlier in the year where watching him play, I thought, you know, I can see the power forward game. I see all the things he's excellent at. And I kind of picture him as a little bit of like a Tyler Bertuzzi type who's just going to fight super hard. He's got a heavy shot. Like he's just going to bring his team into the fight. He's just playing his guts out every night. And obviously we see in the playoffs here for the Bruins, Tyler Bertuzzi's been incredible early on. And so that's not a bad thing. But the more I've watched Ryan Leonard and then at this tournament, I'm seeing even more to him than that. I think he's got a lot to give on offense. I don't think he's just an energy guy, just a guy that's going to try really hard and shoot really hard. He's been just improving all around. I like his hands a lot. I think he's pretty impressive there one-on-one with defensemen. But I mean, it's easy to say with this line because this is just the most absurdly talented line. But the playmaking from all of them have been impressive. But so seeing Leonard kind of catch up with Smith and Perreault in that a little bit has been good to see. I like that a lot. I think he's showing that he could be a little more of a top six driver than just a passenger who just retrieves pucks for stars, something like that. I don't think that's his end game in the NHL. So he's been very impressive with this tournament, Ryan Leonard, and I'm a big fan. So I've got a couple quick fire questions here before we wrap up the show with our prospects of the week. Simple ones here, boys. I'm keeping it easy for you. So first off, who do you think has done the most good for their draft stock so far in this tournament? It doesn't have to be like who's going to rise the most or anything. Just who do you think's done the most good for themselves? And Matt, I'll start with you for this one.
Well, I think the easiest answer is Gabe Perreault because he's just been, leading the tournament and scoring. That's going to get you headlines. And he's had some questions around him already. I think maybe that'll help teams kind of figure that, maybe he's worth the risk, even though he has some holes in his game. I think Perreault for sure right now has done the most for his draft stock to be push himself up the first round.
Yeah, great pick there. Peter, what are your thoughts? Who do you think's done the most good for their draft stock so far at this year's tournament?
I am going to say Otto Stenberg for one. I'm not going to get into too much because I'm just going to leave it at that. But I'm also going to say I'm going to say Lindstein. I really think that, he's starting to show that dynamicism offensively to his game with the passing abilities, but also his shot has been on display too. And that was a really big sticking point for many as well, where maybe the accuracy and the power wasn't quite there, but we're starting to see him shoot the puck a little bit more. And I think if he's developing that shooter mentality to go along with that two-way game and playmaking abilities, I think that's going to work wonders for him.
Nice. That's a great one. I'm going to pick Anton Wahlberg, who, Peter, you've been yes, in charge of that train for the last few months here. But I think I'm catching up a little bit, and I feel like a lot of other people are going to catch up and see just how good this guy could be, see some of those tools on display at this tournament. Next question is the flip side. Who do you think has done themselves the least favors, let's say, when it comes to their draft stock so far in this tournament? Peter, I'll come to you first for this one.
There's a lot of talk about Emilio Arventi with his game overall this season. I'm still up in the air with his play overall because there's still some of that decision making with his game, where it's maybe not as dynamic, or because has that offensive mindset, he just needs to be a little bit more involved, I think. He hasn't done anything to lower it, but I don't think he's done anything to improve it. I think he's just very kind of stagnant with everything this season. And I was kind of high on him as well, kind of like Halttunen after he had a really strong Hlinka Gretzky tournament. But this season has just been kind of somewhat underwhelming overall. And he's been moving around, with the U20 League, U18, Liga, the Meti. He's going on loan. He's moving to different places. I think that'll kind of have an impact on a player's development and his place in the lineup, but I'm just going to probably leave it at that.
Sure. Matt, I'll come to you next. Who do you think has kind of lost the most ground when it comes to draft stock at this year's tournament? We're maybe halfway through, depends on how many games teams play, but who's done themselves the least favors?
Well, it's Carson Bjarnason for me. I mean, this is someone that, coming in as the top goaltender ranked, and I mean, he didn't solidify it. I think he's maybe dropped off a bit, and it's hard for goaltenders. I mean, he's short of a tournament as well, but I'm going to say he definitely didn't do himself any favors, and especially when you got some other goaltenders around him that could potentially pass him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when the margins are so slim, that could be all the difference. I was going to say Noah Dower Nielsen for Sweden. I haven't really been impressed with him, but I've decided to go with all of Team Canada's defense.
There you go.
Cam Allen has had decent offense. He's got 3 points in 3 games, which is like fine. But Lucas Dragicevic, Cam Allen, Caden Price, guys like Quentin Burns, like they have not looked sharp. I mean, the Germany game, they looked good, but I mean, at least at the U18 level, you take that with a pretty heavy grain of salt at this point in time, with the kind of group that Germany has at this tournament. So I just feel like most of those guys, like Cam Allen, this was his chance, and he's still got games left. This is his chance to like prove that everyone that was excited by his play at the Hlinka Gretzky Cup last summer, prove that they were right then and that they're not right now. But he hasn't really served himself very well. He's especially on there. I thought getting out of his league and joining Team Canada, being the captain, maybe he'd have a little more to give. Still a chance for him to prove me wrong, but I've been a little disappointed, and I think he's probably dug himself a little bit of a hole now. All right, we're going to go to our prospects of the week. This is how we love to wrap up our show every week. And Matt, I'm going to come to you first. Who's your prospect of the week this week?
Continuing the trend of Canucks prospects, and Jonathan Lekkerimaki. He's been really impressive in the playoffs, all Svenskan playoffs. 13 points in 12 games. Unfortunately, Modo is leading the series 3-1, so his team is on the brink of elimination after losing 7-6 as we record this today. This morning, or wherever the times, I think time zones in Sweden, whatever. But this morning, from where I am, he had 4 assists in that game in the third period alone. He had 4 assists, and he's done everything he can for that team to bring him to actually win, but they're down 3-1. And the winner of that gets promoted to the Swedish Elite League or Swedish Hockey League. And looks like Modo's going to have that unless they can stage a ridiculous comeback and come back in that series. But Lekkerimaki has been impressive. He's showcased his offense. His playmaking was off the charts in this game. He had made a couple great passes. One was a back pass. It was just, or backhand pass to I can't remember who scored the goal, but 2 primary assists, 2 secondary. He's showcased his shot. Again, it looks like the Lekkerimaki that the Canucks drafted 15th overall, which is just breathe out, Canucks fans. Absolutely. He's fine. He's back. He is back to being that top end prospect. And I didn't have any doubts. I mean, as much as anyone else did. I thought he was going to be fine. So Lekkerimaki is my prospect of the week, very deservedly. 4 assists in the game today. And we'll see what he can do in the elimination game in game 5 on Wednesday. But I mean, regardless, he's still going to be a good NHL player. It's just, don't worry. I mean, I think his injuries were a problem, and it looks like he's bounced back from them. So Lekkerimaki.
Yeah, that's been a great story the last couple of weeks here, because turns out if you take an 18-year-old and they get mononucleosis, a concussion, and then a handful of other random injuries, they're not going to do very well for a while.
Broken foot was the last one.
Broken foot, right? Which is like absurd. Like just a horrible year for him. Super unlucky. And you look at his splits, like regular season, 29 games for Djurgården in Allsvenskan, Hockey Allsvenskan. 29 games, 9 points. not the year anyone was hoping for him to have. I'm sure he would say the same. But then in 12 playoff games, he has 13 points. That's absurd. A great turnaround, easy player. As I think we talked about it was a couple weeks ago, but easy player to root for. It's been awesome to see him turn it around, and hopefully he can keep it up. Peter, who's your prospect of the week this week?
Oh, little shout out to Matthew Knies for getting his first NHL playoff assist in that game against Tampa Bay in Game 3, assisting on Noel Charlie's goal. But he's not going to be my prospect of the week, unfortunately, although I easily could have, but for that alone. But I'm going to go with Calum Ritchie. Obviously, coming into the season, he was projected to be a top 10 player. Had a fantastic Hlinka Gretzky Cup. Looked to have been building on that, or had a slow start, was trying to build on that 45 points in 65 games. Didn't quite have it, but picked up his play in the second half and even into the playoffs where he had 6 points in 5 games. Unfortunately, Oshawa got eliminated, which made him available for this U18 tournament. And he's continuing that, hot second half season where, it's 5 points in 3 games for Team Canada at this tournament. And he led the team and even the tournament at the Hlinka Gretzky Cup with 10 points, leading Canada right now with 5, obviously not leading the tournament because that top line for USA is just absolutely ridiculous. But if they're kind of like the last question that we talked about with a player trying to improve their draft stock, I didn't want to say either Halttunen or Ritchie because I want to say one of them, but I'm keeping Ritchie as my prospect of the week because he's starting to produce. He's finding his game. He's very great in tight spaces, has excellent hands, great ability to protect the puck, and is a very good skater for his size as well. So I think he's got that whole package coming along to be a solid two-way player at the next level. Whether the points are going to come, I don't know, but the smarts that he has and the ability to play that puck protection style is gonna surprise a lot of teams, and they're going to be on notice. And even with the increased production right now, where he was able to be a point per game in the OHL, that's impressive for me for Ritchie to have this hot start and even at the tournament right now.
Yeah, Ritchie's been really impressive. I almost said him for someone who's improved their draft stock earlier, because I think on this Canadian team that needs someone to step forward and be the leader on offense, might not have been my first pick, Barlow, Crystal, Celebrini, but he's been very impressive, and that's been really great to see. My prospect of the week, I'll go through quickly because we talked about him a little bit earlier, but it'll be Otto Stenberg for Sweden. He, it's an easy answer if you took out that top line for the USA, probably, if you asked who's been the best forward in the tournament, Otto Stenberg. But even if you keep those guys in, I think he's in the conversation because his all-around game has been like incredible compared to some of those guys. He doesn't have quite the offensive flash, but he's shown a lot. He was a player that throughout this year, you just kind of had to try to calm yourself down, not overreact when you see the point totals not really adding up to what we expected of him this year. But then every time that I've watched him play, every game I've seen of him, he's looked better than the point totals. He's a complete player. If the points work out, if the offense works out in the NHL, then I could see him as a top 6 forward legitimately, maybe middle 6. But if the offense doesn't super translate that well, he works hard enough and he's good enough defensively that I think he could be a legitimate bottom 6 piece. Pretty safe pick, I would say. And I did my best to keep him in my first round this year, even when I had my doubts. And that feels like I was underselling him the whole time. Now that I'm watching him at this tournament against his peers, he's been borderline dominant on like full 200 feet of the ice. Really impressed with Otto Stenberg. And I'm excited to see where he goes. We were talking before the show about him a bit, and I believe it. I said that I think there's a better chance he goes in the top 20 than outside of the first round. And I believe that at this point. So Otto Stenberg is my prospect of the week. All right. Well, that does it for us this week. Thank you all for tuning into another episode of the Prospect Corner. Make sure you subscribe to the Hockey Writers YouTube channel to make sure you don't miss any of our episodes. Also, make sure you check out our site, thehockeywriters.com, for tons of 2023 NHL draft coverage over the coming months as we get ready for the NHL draft. Again, make sure you check out Hockeypedia on thehockeywriters.com. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Matt. And thank you all for watching this week's edition of Prospect Corner. We'll see you next time.